Okay, I've locked the door. Maybe I can get through this recap right quick without having to stop again. Okay, so we covered everything pretty much on the little board of notes that I had made. But just kind of just recapping to make sure I didn't miss anything that y'all might need to know. Which I hope y'all are reading all of the stuff in your chapter. There's some really cool stuff in here. And there's no way, of course, that I could talk about all of it without just reading you the chapter. But it's really good. So make sure y'all are reading these and remember much of it as you can. It is a lot of information, but some of it will stick and it'll come back to you later. Anyway, here again, we're just breaking down. We talked about the strain. We talked about the proteobacteria, the gram negatives, which are going to be your red ones on this microscope if you were to look at them. It just breaks it down into different categories. The alpha protobacteria is the ones that do the nitrogen fixation that we talked about. And then it just gives some really cool examples of different bacteria that are in these groups. A lot of them you may recognize, especially the one that causes the Rocky Mountain spotted fever. That was really interesting to know that it actually requires a human to live in. And I knew that, but the fact that it's not really replicating in a human, it's just, in a dog, it's just using those as a vector until it hits a human, and then it starts, doing what it needs to do. It's just really interesting that it actually is the person that it really grows in the most and makes sick. So there's all different kinds that it just discusses. The kind that causes the whooping cough, Bordetella pertussis. Most people get vaccines for that nowadays. It's in your tetanus vaccine if you do vaccines. And so that's interesting. That's what actually causes the whooping cough. Anyway, it just goes into lots of examples of more of the bacteria that we might hear, especially in the medical field with the gonorrhea and the meningitis and just different examples. Different places where they live and what they look like. And then it goes into talking about like the salmonella and the E. coli and just more about those different types. There's lots of examples, really interesting stuff, especially if you're interested in the medical field. And then it talks about the non-proteobacteria, which are still gram-negative, so they're going to look red under the microscope. It talks about that. Then we move into the gram-positive bacteria, which are going to look purple. Go. Okay, so the two different types of that we talked about was the actinobacteria and the firmicutes. They mentioned that in the book, just describing further into the different kinds that there are. I thought that it was interesting that many firmicutes have the endospores. So those are the most common where you see the endospore, like Clostridium difficile. Saw that a lot in the hospital. We always just called it C. diff for short. It does cause really bad diarrhea, and it has a very specific smell. I'm sure you wanted to know that, but it does. And so it's a gram-positive bacteria. If they actually took a poop sample and then the lab could take it and put it under a scope, put the stains on it, and they would see that it would be purple on the slide, and that would be one way they could actually take a specimen from a patient and be like, oh, they have Clostridium difficile. They could actually do that in the lab at the hospital. They could look at it under a slide and see it because it has a very distinct shape and the purple stain, and so they could actually identify it so we could start treating the patient. So that's one gram-positive bacteria. Your staphylococcuses go into the gram-positive bacterias. Your streptococcuses, that's what it talks about on the next page. Those are going to be in the gram-positive bacteria group. Lactobacillus, which is really good bacteria that we use to make yogurt and pickles. Yum. Talking about all these gross bacteria and diarrhea and all these sicknesses. And then we talk about the bacteria that we can use to make yogurt and pickles. Now, Lactobacillus is really good. There's a Lactobacillus acidophilus, which is what you see in milk a lot of times. And so it has a lot of good uses. I actually use Lactobacillus to ferment our animal feed, our chicken feed and our pig feed, so they can break down and get more nutrients out of their food because it's already fermented. So I actually ferment all of our farm animals' feed using lactobacillus, and it has a very distinct smell. I think it smells like bread. My husband thinks it smells like dirty diapers. So I don't know what that says about me, but that's what lactobacillus is used for a lot of stuff. But I use it regularly, like I said, to ferment our food. Then we move into Listeria. That's just some more bacteria that live in foods. She escaped past the door. No. And now I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, y'all. Oh, I thought this was neat. Listeria was actually one of those facultative anaerobes. It's rod-shaped, so that makes it the bacillus. Not bacillus. Yeah, a bacillus, because it's rod-shaped. And what you can tell here, that it looks, somewhat rod-shaped. Okay, hang on.